I have a confession to make. My 9-year-old loves Doritos, like loves them. If I would let him, he would have Doritos for breakfast. And honestly, sometimes I let him have Doritos as part of his breakfast. But as a mom and as a doctor who cares deeply about foods and hormones, I want to educate him, but I want to do it in a way that causes him to have a good relationship with food. Not one like I had where it's all or nothing, where I label foods as good or bad or try to restrict food groups. So we talk. We talk a lot. We talk a lot about food and what's in it. We actually spend a lot of time talking about Doritos. And one of the things we've talked about is Doritos and the dyes that they have in them and how they affect his brain. So last night we were in the car and he was eating blackberries as a snack. And all of a sudden he looks at me and he's like looking at the blackberries and he says, "Do blackberries have dye in them?" And it started this conversation with my kids and I that was one of the best conversations I think we've ever had about food. And next I'm going to tell you how it led us to this like aha wow moment. So now I have this opportunity to educate myself and him about the color of blackberries. So he's eating blackberries and I'm Googling the benefits, and I start telling him how blackberries have different compounds that contribute micronutrients and they help his brain and his body, and that the color, I think it's the color, comes from anthocyanins, or anyway, a word I learned yesterday that actually promotes brain health, which we talk about a lot because of his ADHD. So we also talked about fiber and carbohydrates and all the things. So it was a really good educational experience for both of us. And then he said something that really activated the mom guilt. He said, "Mom, wouldn't it be better if someone had never tasted any other foods? Like if I had never tasted Doritos, then I would just eat blackberries and I would think that that's awesome because that's all I ever had." And all I could say was, "Yeah, buddy, that would be awesome." And then I felt this guilt, like it's my fault that he knows the deliciousness of Doritos, because let's be honest, I'm a fan of a good chip as well. So I kind of let that creep in overnight, but in the morning I restarted the conversation, and that's where it truly, truly was awesome. Okay, so now it's the next morning, and I just felt like I had left the conversation in this really kind of powerless way. Like he knows that there are scientists out there in the world creating these highly processed foods to a level of perfection for the amount of salt and sugar and fat that they have in them. And I just kind of felt a little uneasy about how we'd left the conversation. So in the morning, I said, now that we have this information and we know how great for us blackberries are and how Doritos and other processed foods are not as good for us, what do we do? What do we do with that information? And I said, can we think of anything else in life where, as humans, we don't do it because it's not good for us, even though it might feel really good? And this time my 11-year-old said, yeah, drugs. And I was just blown away. And I, me never missing an opportunity to talk about hormones, I said, absolutely. I said, drugs and highly processed foods like Doritos, they actually both secrete this hormone called dopamine that activate the reward centers in the brain that make you feel good. So drugs and Doritos, they do the same thing. That's why they're so addictive. They're created that way. But as humans, well, at least for me personally, and I think the kids are right now have been taught that, like, we don't do drugs. We don't do drugs because they're bad for us. So then I said, well, can you think of something that we do that's good for us, but may not feel good all the time, but we do it solely because it's good for us? And then my 9-year-old said, well, we take our medicine. And it was like this light bulb. And I was like, yes, food can be medicine. Like Hippocrates says, let food be thy medicine. And at that moment, it came kind of full circle. And he still loves Doritos. But that education that I was able to share with them, education that I've not necessarily learned in medical school, but by being nerdy and watching documentaries and studying on my own, and being able to share that with my kids made me feel a little less, I'll say this, a little more empowered. And that was a good day.